Introducing Carvana Value Tracker, where you can track your car's value over time and learn what's driving it. It might make you excited.
Whoa, didn't know my car was valued this high.
It might make you nervous.
Uh-oh, market's flooded. My car's value just dipped 2.3%.
It might make you optimistic.
Our low mileage is paying off. Our value's up.
And it might make you realistic.
Car prices haven't gone up in a couple weeks. Maybe it's time to sell.
But it will definitely make you an expert on your car's value. Carvana Value Tracker. Visit Carvana.com to start tracking your car's value today.
Life insurance. What's your excuse for putting it off? Can't afford it? Too much hassle? Think your work coverage is enough? There's a lot of excuses for putting off life insurance, but one big reason why you shouldn't. If the unexpected were to happen to you, who would pay the mortgage, the kids' tuition, and all the other bills? In a time of grief, the last thing you would want is for your family to have to sell the house and struggle to survive financially. At Ethos, we could get you covered in just 10 minutes and boom, family protected. Rates can increase the longer you wait, so no more excuses. Take 10 minutes today and discover the modern way to get the life insurance coverage you need. Ethos, fast and easy online term life insurance. Up to $2 million in coverage with no medical exam. Some policies as low as $1 a day. Answer a few health questions and get your free quote at ethoslife.com/audio. That's ethoslife.com/audio.
10 years of the day of that accident that I was lucky to be alive, that it didn't kill me. And secondly, I was told by the doctor I'd never pitch again. But 10 years later to the day, I was walking into that Olympic stadium to play in the first ever Olympic softball game. So.
Hey guys, Tyler here with Black Diamond Softball and Fitness, bringing you a brand new episode of the Foul Pole to Foul Pole podcast. This week's guest is two-time Olympic gold medalist and really softball international icon, Michele Smith. Michele talks to us a little bit about the international game as well as the collegiate game, and she shares some personal stories from her past that kind of shaped her into the person and professional she is today. Enjoy.
Okay.
I don't know how to introduce you because there's so much that you kind of want to put into it, but you don't want to just, read like a whole piece. I mean, the ESPN analyst, ESPN color, play-by-play. But I think the two-time Olympic champion has got to be there. How do you usually, when you speak, how do you usually get introduced?
It is interesting. Sometimes people look at your career and they're like, how do you narrow it down into 2 sentences? So I think the easiest way, most people just say two-time Olympic gold medalist, ESPN analyst, some more of the baseball guys will be like Hall of Famer, because, the baseball, the Hall of Fame is what it's like after you retire. So I'll answer to almost about anything when it comes to softball. So
right. I was talking to my wife last night and I said, you know what if I just went with softball icon and then because to me, when I told my middle daughter, I said, you're not gonna believe who I'm talking to. She's like, who? I said, Michele Smith. She said, really? She said, Dad, she's goated. I said, I know, honey. She's like, Dad, if you talk to her, you're going to be goated as well. She's like, just call her the GOAT.
That's awesome.
Because she loves your breakdowns. Anytime we're watching, she's like, was that Michele? I said, yes, that's Michele. She goes, okay, I'm just making sure. Sure.
That's awesome.
So,
I love it. It's funny because when I, after the 96 Olympics, I would say for the 10 years after, I'd walk through at the Atlanta airport, and because of my big hair, if I ever had anything USA on, they're like, you're that pitcher, you're that USA softball pitcher. And then it kind of graduated from you're that softball pitcher to you're that ESPN lady. So It's funny how that all kind of switches gears as you move through your career.
How long have you been doing the analyst side, not only just with ESPN, but actually getting in and kind of breaking the game down?
So I actually started to do a lot of educational stuff through the early 90s. My first analyst work on television was in 1984, 85 for the Junior World Championships. It was Team Japan against Team USA. Mm-hmm. The Junior World Championships. And then I just started to fall into it because, back in the 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, there wasn't a lot of softball on television. It was mostly the NCAA championship. So it's the Women's College World Series. And back then it may have only even been quarterfinals, semifinals, finals, and just not a lot of opportunity, maybe a little bit of Little League. So I would maybe call anywhere from 10 to 20 games a year in a very condensed time frame, probably, May, June, and Little League in August. And then I wouldn't do it again for another 10 months or so, 9-10 months. So it didn't start to really become a full-time profession for me until just after I retired playing professionally in Japan. And that was like in 2009. So it's kind of interesting the way the sport's just really, kind of grown over the years.
Would you say the prep work, I know it's not the same, but the preparation that you have to put into it, it kind of correlates between playing and being able to know who's playing and breaking it down?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do a lot of homework. So for me, any analyst in general, we do a lot of homework looking at trends, looking at analytics. I'm a big analytic person. I really like to dive into numbers because I think the numbers tell a pretty good story. And you can kind of predict outcomes. So I spend a ton of time looking at all the teams, looking at the pitchers, the hitters, maybe tendencies that I might, want to point out during the game. And then physically, there's the travel to the fields, just like, the athletes. And then even on a game day, a lot of times we'll show up at the park before the teams even get there. So people don't realize the amount of time commitment behind the scenes. I think the other thing that's really big, Tyler, that a lot of people don't realize is how many people behind the scenes work just to put that one game on air. And then when you get to a production like the Women's College World Series or the Clearwater ESPN event, I mean, you're looking at hundreds of people behind the scene, probably more employees from ESPN or more people putting the show on than the actual number of athletes that are playing in the Women's College World Series. It's pretty incredible.
I could tell that there was, going into this year, there was a big emphasis on Clearwater and kind of getting it, the sport out there, getting it on TV, and then just the popularity that they had built on in years past kind of comes to Clearwater, and it just built all the way up to the World Series this year. So how long was the prep work for Clearwater getting into it with all the teams that were going there? I'm guessing you guys were down there like weeks before.
Yeah, so a lot of prep work. The city of Clearwater does a really good job of making sure the fields are, in the condition they need to be, wrapping the fields, giving it that TV look. And then all of the analysts, because there were so many different teams, just like at the Women's College World Series, we were having calls. We always have calls with coaches, leading up to big events like that. So it's a ton of prep work. It's early on in the season. So it's kind of sometimes hard to get analytics and get numbers and really define trends. So it's a little bit of a different format because it's so early in the year. You do a lot of historical stuff. Beth Mowins, when she's calling game, she really is like an encyclopedia of the sport going back, at least at the, at the collegiate level. She's really done a great job of, over the years of, kind of putting the sport together historically. So there's a lot of that early on in the season, talking about last year as well, the holdovers, who's moved, who's, changed teams, all that sort of stuff is a big part. But yeah, there's just so much that goes on behind the scenes. I think a lot of people look at a broadcast and think, oh, that's your 2 hours and 15 minutes worth of work or whatever. They don't realize the hours and hours of work that go on behind the scenes.
I gotta say, when you watch a game, how you guys are breaking stuff down. Nowadays, with the instant replay, and you guys can kind of sit on something for a second, and it's not just like a flash in the pan and go, oh, that was a nasty curveball, or look at the rise ball. You can actually have some time to explain. So with the technology that's going into it, how does that enhance what you do as an analyst and able to break stuff down as you talk about the data and stuff behind that?
Right. So a lot of times too, we have our audio boxes, we have different like mute buttons, and then we have a talk back button. So I can actually talk back to the truck, and I can talk to the tape room and say, hey, I really like this rise ball. Look at the way it's moving, or look at the way she's throwing it at the belt level, and then at, a chase level rise ball up at the eyes. So that they might put together, the tape room might be like, oh yeah, I see what you're talking about, Michelle. So they'll put together real quick. They'll pull a rise ball, boom, that's maybe at the belt. and then polarized ball that's up at the eyes so that I can talk about it. So a lot of times you say the analyst kind of is driving the bus, because I'll talk about what I want to see. I'll get on that talk button and tell the director, like, I want a shot of the 5-6 hole, because look at where the shortstop is playing. So the stuff that I see, I need to communicate that to the truck. I get on that talk back button and kind of, build the story that we're looking to build. And so, you kind of work that together with your play-by-play, with the analyst, with the, the producer and the director and the truck, then the tape room. There's all these different people that are kind of making the show meld together. It's kind of like controlled chaos, we like to say. Which is live television. So, and it's also working with that play-by-play, where is he or she going? Are they talking more, historical, or are we actually nuts and bolts of the game? So, each play-by-play might have a different style. Each analyst has a little bit of a different style. A lot of stuff for me is just what jumps out on the game, because, I watch a game and immediately I can see pitching mechanics, hitting mechanics, defensive alignments, different things like that. And it just jumps off the page at me, just because I've been around the sport for so long, where other people, they might see things differently. So everybody has a little bit of a different flavor of the way they call their games.
So when you started out, did you think it was going to get to this, where we're at now, with being able to break everything down like frame by frame?
Yeah, no, it is crazy. And a lot of times too, it depends on how many cameras that we have and what their lens rate is. At the Women's College World Series, we have what we call super slow-mos or super mo's. Mm-hmm. And so when they break that down, I mean, the frame rate, you can see the tumble of the ball, the way it's spinning, you can see all this amazing stuff. We don't always have those, bells and whistles, we like to call them, during the regular season. Same thing with a telestrator. I might not always have that to draw on the screen. So sometimes we have more bells and whistles than others, but yeah, it's pretty incredible how we can really break stuff down. And that's why too, it even shows how good, at times the umpires can be on those bang bang calls. We're seeing it in super slow-mo, and they're making that those decisions in real time. It's tough. There's a lot that goes into it.
So opposing coaches are able to just find a game on ESPN or find a game wherever, because it has that camera angle that they're looking for, or if they're looking for a specific play or how a team is playing a certain thing, they're able to see different angles and stuff. And you were talking about the data, and with data comes that technology for game film and that kind of stuff. As coaches are being able to break that stuff down, how big do you think film is in today's game compared to couple years ago, or maybe even a decade ago, where there wasn't a whole lot of game film?
Yeah, I think it's a big part of it now. I mean, you can really find those tendencies, like you were saying, defensive alignment, bunt situations as first baseman, they staying back, or they coming up, or is the pitcher fielding the bunt on the right side of the infield. It's just all those different things you can find out about your opponent now, so you have a better idea when you are bunting where you want to put your bunt down, all that stuff. So, I think that like when I played professionally in Japan, we watch footage all the time. I mean, I spent hours watching footage while I was, like, say I was on my training bike, I'd just sit and watch of teams that we'd be playing coming up on the weekend, or I'd watch myself, kind of scout myself and see what my pitches are looking like. So there's always time to do that. I think that it's definitely kind of leaked down into the collegiate game, and then from the collegiate game to the elite travel ball levels, where people understand that when you're more prepared, when it's coming, when what your opponent's going to do, you have a better chance for a favorable outcome that you want. So I think that the other thing that been a game changer is like wireless technology, and also the ability to remotely be able to look at stuff. You're not tethered to your computer, and you're not tethered to your TV anymore to look at either educational videos as well as scouting videos. So you can be, driving, you can be just more productive with your time.
You'll see it sometimes watching a game where not even in between innings, but after an at bat, a player will go into the dugout and then go into the clubhouse, and they can immediately see, what they thought they saw on the field, but they can break it down real quick, or almost immediately after a game. Like, they have that on there of, this is what I felt, this is what I saw, but what was it, outside of what I knew. I think technology is driving the data. And what we see now is these athletes getting bigger, faster, and stronger. Yes, of course, but the athletes are so much smarter today because of the information they have at their fingertips.
Yeah, they're definitely more well educated earlier on in the season, I would say. And earlier on, you don't have to play the same team 3 or 4 times and have it in your memory bank. You can have the your opponent, that team, you can have their games that they played someone else, and you're just as scouted as if you played them 3 or 4 times and actually kind of lived through the experience of the game. So I think that there's definitely a lot of that. I think that our athletes are they're better at a younger age because they do have that training available to them at a younger age. So they're just more prepared. It's more seamless. Like the things that professional athletes were doing years ago, we now have, the collegiate athlete and vice versa, collegiate athlete. Now we have like the travel ball athletes that are training like the collegiate athlete. And that's a big part of the growth of the sport. I remember back when we first started doing the Women's College World Series, we would ask questions to the teams when we would meet with them. We'd meet with all 8 teams like we do every year before the Women's College World Series. And we'd, for a long time, we would ask the question, what's the one thing to the freshmen, especially, what's the one thing you wish you knew in high school that you've learned this freshman, year in college? And every one of them would say, we wish we'd have lifted weights, but now we've got a culture of young kids that before they even get to college, they're doing weight training and agilities and all the different things that, a lot of these kids weren't doing until they got to college. And then from college, more so at the pro or Olympic level. So we have these kids now, that's great to see them doing that, before they even get into college. And so that's why we have these more developed younger athletes, which I think makes a big difference.
You were a multi-sport athlete growing up. I found out that you had to stay busy, so you were always into sports, playing sports. When did softball go to the front, or has softball always been in the front of the pack and you did the other sports just to stay active? Yeah,
that's a great question. I definitely a busybody, was always out playing a sport, whatever was in season. I played with the boys and the girls in the neighborhood. I would say though, softball and baseball, flies and grounders, like that was always my love. I just love the sport of baseball and softball. I think that once I didn't start to pitch till I was a sophomore in high school. So I started playing or at least pitching really late. And I was always a good athlete. I loved basketball though. Basketball was probably my first love, maybe because it was more challenging. Once I started to pitch, I was very blessed, and I kind of became good quickly, but with a lot of work. I would pitch after, I would pitch after field hockey practice. I'd pitch after basketball practice, and I pitched year round basically. And I needed to, because I didn't start till so late, till sophomore in high school. So even my freshman year in college, I'd only been pitching for, I came into school only pitching 4 years, and that was my freshman year. So I had a lot of learning, and I knew I needed to do things that were non-traditional at that time. I took physics, I took movement sciences, I took all that stuff to really understand human movement and the science aspects, because I was always loved science. But I do think it's important for athletes to be multifaceted, to play multiple sports. At some point you're going to drill in, and you're going to get a little more serious about some than others. But I do feel like there's nothing wrong with playing, basketball or other sports that you might play. And then you just have to practice your softball throughout and around that sport. But I'm a big believer in just making sure you're staying fresh as well, because kids get burnt out so young, because that's all they do. And even at the professional level, for me, when I was playing ball at a high level, 10 months out of the year, basically once I got back from Japan and my season was over in November, December and January, I did not even step on the field unless I was doing one of my camps. And then but otherwise I had nothing to do with the sport. I was cycling, I was lifting weights, I was training off the field. And then come February, I'd be like, softball season, I can't wait to get back out on the field. I was hungry, and I think that's the problem. A lot of times kids nowadays aren't always hungry, because they're burnt out. They're spending too much time doing one thing.
That leads me into that recovery downtime, listening to the body and not driving constantly. How important is that downtime recovery as we start to find out more information about that and we're smarter at what we do now?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to, I always talk about that, it's kind of, it's a triangle where you prepare, you perform, and then you recover. And if you don't recover and you're constantly preparing, performing, and not recovering, you're all of a sudden, you're not going to be preparing or performing at the right level that you need to. So, I was always very good at listening to my body. I was always very good at, charting. I actually made a training, like weight training, agilities. I made a year-round training book. She's probably 25 years ago. I was way ahead of my time, right? And nobody was interested in it. They're like, meh, we're still learning on the field stuff. And I'm like, no, this is really important stuff. You need it. And it's funny that I feel like literally I was 25 years ahead of my time. Like people are now would be more interested in it than they were back then, because they're like, I'm just trying to get my kid to, throw right overhand, more or less lift weights, or do agilities. So, I do think that it's important for kids to have fun, to fall in love with the sport, and then be okay taking a little bit of time away so that you can recuperate, you can recover from injuries. Just mentally, you can be, as mentally fit as you need to be and as hungry as you need to be. Because if you don't have that, if you're not mentally as well as physically fit, and your desire's not there, you're not hungry, you're never going to get your A game out, or that top elite level out.
I think what happens, I see it a lot in youth now. It's the more you practice, the better you're going to get. And to a certain degree, I understand that and I believe that. But if you're not allowing the mind and the body to kind of sync up, you're not actually getting better. You're burning out.
Right.
And there's big moments in the year, of course, for travel ball girls and for high school girls that are trying to get to that college level, trying to get recruited, trying to get exposure, trying to get seen. And those are those packed in couple of weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, that time frame. Outside of that, there's important games and stuff that goes on, but those are the times where you can work on different things, let your body, try different things, mentally kind of prepare yourself for that big stage, that big moment. When you were playing, how did you mentally prepare yourself for, okay, here comes a big stretch. This is either a big tryout, whether it's trying to make the national team or, at OSU, whatever. How did you mentally prepare yourself to embrace the changes that you've made and have confidence in those changes to go out there and actually perform?
Yeah, I think that at least for me, every year I'd really look at my year as a whole and be like, all right, what are my big events? So obviously when I was playing professional in Japan for Toyota, it was knowing that I was going to have these really important games in the spring. Then in the summer, I was going to be home with Team USA. And then the championships in Japan, which are the most important part of the year, was all in the fall. So we had a tournament in September, beginning of October, depending on the year. That was a single elimination tournament with 32 teams. So it took had to win 5 games to win that tournament. So that was a grind. And then the league championship was usually in the middle of November. And that really was the big one. You had to be one of the top four teams in the league. And then there was the page system. So 1 and 2 played, the winner of that automatically goes to championship. And then, 3 and 4 play, winner of that plays the loser, the 1-2. So, it was a really high level, like super intense time of the year, knowing that that's when all your championships are. So for me, I would always kind of work backward and be like, all right, where do I need to peak and where do I need to grind? And, when you kind of can see that in your head, then, all right, this is where I'm lifting heavy. This is where I'm cycling 300 miles a week. This is or spending, 8 hours on a, not 8 hours in a week on a training bike or, whatever it is. This is where you're figuring out this is heavy. This is where now I'm kind of, recuperating a little bit. So for me, it was a lot of that. And it was a lot of journaling. It was logging all my pitches in practices, as well as in bullpens, as well as in games, just so I knew where I needed to be. And then as the season matured and went through, knowing where we were at, if there's a chance I was going to have to throw a double header in a day, then I'd start preparing, my pitching workouts where I'd throw a 150 pitch workout, I'd take an hour off, and then I'd throw another 150 pitch workout, kind of simulating what I'd have to be doing in a double header at an elite level. So, I was always kind of looking at my, schedule, looking at how I needed to perform, and then working backwards to put myself in the best, position to win with my conditioning. And so, I was very proud of that. I think I was ahead of the curve in a lot of my training as well. I was a big cyclist toward the end of my career, which was a huge part of my conditioning. And, because I knew that I wasn't going to run out of gas. Somebody else was going to run out of gas before me. I just needed to not make a mistake before them. So
that's incredible. I just listening to you talk about being able to listen to your body and understanding how it cycles and studying, doing the mental side of it. A lot of girls do the physical side of it, but they don't know why they're doing it that way. They're just being told. They don't fully believe in it because they don't know that it's wrong or don't know that it's right. They just do it because they're told to do that.
Right.
When you were in high school and making that transition into college, how much of a grind was it for you? How many high school, I guess, travel ball tournaments, playing like that national level scene before you were making it into college? Were you playing as much as these girls are playing today, or was it scaled back some, or kind of what's the comparison?
Yeah. So I would say, I grew up in New Jersey in the Northeast, so there was not a lot of youth softball. There was a lot of women's softball. So I actually played up. I did not by any means, play the number of games that these young athletes play nowadays. So what I did do, though, is I practiced more than likely than them. And so that's where you get better. You get better on the practice field. You get experience in games, right, but you get better on the practice field. And so for me, when I was playing games, especially in the summer, I was playing women's major fast pitch. So I was literally at 16, 17, 18 years old, I was playing against women that were already done with their collegiate careers. And I mean, you talk about sink or swim. It was like, I was like, whew, okay. Every day was a lesson. I mean, it was just piled on. And, but I learned so much, and it gave me such a head start. So then when I did go to college at Oklahoma State, I felt like, I had already played at this really elite level. So it really made a profound difference in my career. So I would say, to your question and to your point, I think it's important for kids nowadays to make sure that they're practicing enough, not just playing, so that you're developing, not just, getting experience. And, especially depending on your position, you can spend a lot of time playing a game for 3 at-bats and maybe 1 ball in the outfield, so really you're going to get a lot better when you're really practicing hard and hitting what you need to do outside of the chalk lines to be better as well.
Right. So at Oklahoma State, you go in freshman year, everything is good. And then something happens. Tell the folks kind of what happened, and then the process after that. And then 10 years later from that instance, what happened?
Yeah. So in between my freshman and sophomore year at Oklahoma State, I was back in New Jersey, and I ended up getting in a car accident. I fell out of a truck, and you know how it would be, Murphy's Law and all the things. I ended up hitting my elbow on a post, my left elbow, as a left-handed pitcher. So, and I basically chopped off part of the elbow bone, the olecranon process, and it ripped my tricep off the attachment as well. So I had to go through this emergency surgery where they sewed my muscle basically back down to my bone, and my ulnar nerve was exposed. So they didn't think I would ever pitch again, because I thought, I had so much nerve damage, and your ulnar nerve basically controls or innervates your pinky and your ring finger, half of your ring finger. So anyway, it was a mess. I went back to college. I was in a cast for 3 months, in a straight arm cast. And then once I got out of the cast, my arm was frozen. I could barely move it. I could only move it about 10 degrees. So then the training staff did a really good job of trying to get my range of motion back. And that was like literally hours every day in the training room, hot whirlpool, cold whirlpool, just trying to get that range of motion back in my elbow. And the whole time not knowing if I'd ever pitch again, because the doctor said I would more than likely never pitch again. And I was really stubborn. I'm like, well, if I'm never pitching again, I'm deciding that I have to at least try. So
Introducing Carvana Value Tracker, where you can track your car's value over time and learn what's driving it. It might make you excited.
Whoa, didn't know my car was valued this high.
It might make you nervous.
Uh-oh, market's flooded. My car's value just dipped 2.3%.
It might make you optimistic.
Our low mileage is paying off. Our value's up.
And it might make you realistic.
Car prices haven't gone up in a couple weeks. Maybe it's time to sell.
But it will definitely make you an expert on your car's value. Carvana Value Tracker. Visit Carvana.com to start tracking your car's value today.
This is the smell of the leftover tuna fish sandwich you left in your lunchbox over the weekend in a wimpy trash bag.
Wimpy, wimpy, wimpy!
Blech! And this is the smell of that same sandwich in a hefty, ultra-strong trash bag.
Hefty, hefty, hefty!
Ah, smell the difference? Hefty Ultra Strong has Arm & Hammer with continuous odor control, so no matter what's inside your trash, you can stay one step ahead of stinky. And for bigger jobs, try the superior strength of Hefty Large Black Bags.
Basically, after 6 months, I got enough range of motion back where I could, even to this day, I can't straighten my arm all the way and I can't bend my arm all the way. It's really kind of crazy when you look at it. But it got to that point where I was like, all right, now I got to try to start pitching. So in December, I started to try to pitch, and I'd throw 5 pitches and my hand would go numb from that nerve problem, I still had so much scar tissue and stuff. So long story short, I just kept working and icing and ibuprofen and did as much as I could. And those 5 pitches went to 10 to 20 to 30. So by February of my sophomore year, I was back playing and pitching. And they probably, Oklahoma State, when I talked to my coaches, they're probably like, oh, we should have redshirted you. But our senior pitcher ended up blowing out her ankle, so they didn't really have anyone else. So that's kind of why I didn't redshirt my sophomore year. So unfortunately, that would have helped me a lot if I would have redshirted that year. But ended up coming back from that accident, that horrific accident, and was able to pitch, and ended up throwing the ball about 3 miles an hour harder after the accident than before the accident, which was kind of crazy. But the eeriest part of the story is that the date of the accident was July 21st and 1986. And the first ever Olympic game was July 21st, 1996, 10 years of the day of that accident. That I was lucky to be alive, that it didn't kill me. And secondly, I was told by the doctor I'd never pitch again. But 10 years later to the day, I was walking into that Olympic stadium to play in the first ever Olympic softball game. So it was kind of it was a blessing in disguise. The accident, I learned a lot from it. I learned about being a great teammate. I learned about how much I love the sport. I learned about how I had to do prehab for the rest of my career instead of rehab. I rehabilitated after this horrific accident, but then in order to stay ahead of the curve, because I still had a really bad elbow that would act up as time, I had to do a lot of prehab to keep my arm strong, to keep my mechanics in check so that my elbow was not flaring up. And so yeah, I learned a lot, and I popped out walking into that Olympic stadium thinking, wow, this is why I went through that horrific accident. It taught me something, and here I am 10 years later as an Olympic athlete. So it was pretty cool.
That's an incredible story. I'm a big believer in things happen for a reason, and things that are out of our control. And I think we're put here for different reasons and to affect different, people in different ways. There's some girl that doesn't know that story that now will be able to hear that story. And there's so much that comes out of that, because how much you learned and how much you're able to share with us about that. You mentioned prehab, and I think that is a huge part of it. I think 98% of pitchers, I'll just say pitchers in general, don't do any or enough. I'll go to it. Don't do enough to prepare themselves. So even going through the injury, the horrific accident, you're able to learn something and pass this on to girls. Mentally, just to stay with it, and you're able to share that message. How often do you hear from females, athletes and stuff that are going through something that you can relate to because you've gone through this, and help them get through something, and you see them flourish now.
Yeah. And a lot of these kids nowadays, they have social media, they have pressures on them that I never had when I was a young athlete. But I do remember the one thing that is consistent and is the same is that, that accident did really teach me that softball is what I did. It wasn't who I was. And I was very blurred, before that accident, because softball was my life. It's all I did. That's the only reason I thought people liked me. I was at that age where it becomes your identity. And, from the second that accident happened, it made me realize, look, I need to be a better teammate and I need to be a better human being, because I'm going to be a person and a human being longer than I'm going to be a softball pitcher. So it taught me really the importance of things in life. And I think nowadays, a lot of these young kids have so much pressure. The social media, like I was saying, they're always being compared to something else, to someone else. So it's hard for them to keep their confidence up and to realize their value is who they are as a person, as a daughter, as a teammate, all the things that are more important than always just the numbers and, the grading, like who's number one and who's number two, and, all the stuff that really doesn't matter, because you mature in life and you mature as an athlete, and you realize that it's the people to your left and your right that make what you're doing so memorable and so awesome. So for me, I've always tried to spread that message, even, back in the 90s, when I was playing, like, look, softball's what I do. It's not who I am. I better be a far better person than I am a softball player. And I really, even to this point in my career, after, 2 Olympic gold medals and 8 championships over the 16 years in Japan, I still always say to people, you can rattle off all these statistics and all these things I've accomplished, but I really hope that what my legacy is that, wow, she helped other people. She was a great example. She was a really good role model, and she was a great human being. She was charitable. She made, sat on charitable boards. So I hope that those are the things that people remember more than, I had a sub-1 ERA or whatever the heck my numbers were. So, those are the things I try to relate it to athletes and to these young kids, to say that these are the perspective. It's not the how many followers you have on Instagram or, Twitter. It's the perspective, and it's the life lessons that that you want to share with people, because that's what you're going to remember.
I genuinely think that softball is up there with the tops. It's soccer when you're talking about cross-cultural type sport, because it's something that we have in common. And you played 16 seasons in Japan, 8 championship, 8 MVPs. But just listening to you talk, yeah, that's cool. But I was in Japan, and I was able to learn a lot about yourself and learn about a different culture, and be able to kind of, teach them as well, American values, American ways, and sport. And they were as well. Tell us a little bit about your time in Japan and how that helped you kind of grow as a person, and what that did for you professionally and, personally.
Japan was the best thing I ever did in my life. But it was scary. I basically went over, I thought I was going to go to medical school. So here I was coaching at the University of Oregon. I was going to go to medical school and had this opportunity to go to Japan. The first year they asked me, I turned it down. The second year I was like, I'm ready to go to medical school. So if I'm going to go, I need to either go to Japan now, earn a little money for a year, and then I'll go to medical school. So that 1 year turned into 16 years, crazy enough, because in that 1 year, it's when they decided that softball was going to be in the Olympics. It was going to be a full medal sport. And I thought, I should just keep playing softball. I have an opportunity to be, represent the US, to be an Olympian, to maybe win a medal. And so that's kind of how that just continued. The game just started to continue to thrive, and I did within it. So going to Japan was the smartest thing, the best thing I ever did. They taught me a lot. I taught them a lot. I'll never forget my first year over there. One of the executives pulled me in and basically said that there's this Japanese saying that says, a nail that sticks out is a nail that gets hammered down. And I was like, what? I was like, I'm not conforming. I was like, you did not bring me here as one of the best pitchers in the world to all of a sudden become Japanese or become, do things the way you do it. I said, you want me to be me. You want me to be what makes me the best pitcher in the world. So it was interesting how they would teach me, but I would teach them different things. And the level of our team, started to really rise, and I would get more emotion out of my teammates. And all of a sudden people loved to watch us because here we were playing with all this energy and emotion, when in Japan, a lot of the players were a little more reserved and a little bit more, they didn't really show that emotion and that fire. So it was interesting to see the way the sport grew in Japan, the way I learned from some of the Japanese way. Like, they were so good at warming up and cooling down, which in the US we never did. We maybe warmed up, and then when practice was over, our cool down was just shoving our stuff in our bag and leaving the field. In Japan, we would spend 30 minutes like stretching and warming down and, kind of a debrief. We'd talk about every practice afterward, every game afterward, So it was just amazing how much I learned from the Japanese culture, how much of the, softball and how much Western, influence I brought over to them. So it was a good marriage, you could almost say, of really doing some great things within the sport.
When we talk about softball internationally, Japan, of course, is the first, international country that pops up in someone's mind, says because of the professional league that's over there. I mean, we've had a lot of athletes go over there and have successful careers. Internationally, where do you see the game right now with, what's going on with the Olympics, what we just recently had with the recent Olympics? Where's the game internationally, and where do you see it going from here?
I wish our sport was a little bit more organized at the like super elite level. Obviously, there's the Olympics. We're on and off the program. That's a whole nother subject. It's very frustrating between the things that go on, the policies and the politics of the IOC, right. And the way we were on and basically got kicked off. So it's very, very frustrating. I mean, internationally, our sport is continuing to grow. It's definitely the haves and the have-nots. You have the countries that are really smart about it. You have the, Japan, who it's all corporate sponsored, and that's how they run their entire Japanese Olympic program, is that a lot of these conglomerate companies sponsor different sports or different athletes. So they're employees for the company. And then if they're a sprinter, they run for their track team, or they play rugby for their rugby team, or softball, depending on the different sports that they support. So they do it the right way for every sport. And there's other countries too. Australia does a good job with the Australia Institute of Sport. Canada obviously has made huge, I was so happy to see them medal in the Tokyo Olympics. I think that was huge for our sport. Italy has a great programs. You could definitely say there's a top 8 to 10 teams in the world that are continuing to grow and thrive and train their younger athletes. And then beyond that, the sport still needs some help at a lot of the international level. So I think we have to do a better job of getting out there and building it. We've done such a great job within the US at the grassroots level, but we need to get outside of our own borders and start helping grow the sport around the world, because it's a great sport for young girls. It really matures young female athletes into understanding teamwork, but also, personal responsibility. Nobody else is in that batter's box with you. Nobody else is in that pitching circle with you or at that shortstop position. So you have to play your stuff well. And then the team, you learn as young girls, which is so important for young girls to support other young girls and to support each other and lift each other up. So we've got a lot of work to do, but hopefully we can continue to have big events, even in non-Olympic years and Olympic years when we're not on the program, just to continue to grow the sport. That's going to be the key.
I think we could benefit from, like you were saying, a yearly like softball classic, where it could be a tune-up going into the years for the Olympics. We have a ton of ambassadors, a lot of people involved in the game, like yourself and others, that just continue to preach the message. And for me, I think it's the greatest individual team sport there is, because yes, you're on a team and you're relied upon, but like you just said, man, you're the only one in the circle. You're the only one in the batter's box. That's you standing out there in left field. I mean, it's a unique sport, and it teaches so much that's in the game, but off the game as well. Professionally, what are we doing professionally for women's professional softball? Where do we go from college?
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
What's that next step for athletes that aren't, on the national team or not trying out for the national team or competing in the Olympics? Where do these athletes go? Because we have got a ton that it's college, and then, okay, where do I go?
Yeah, I know. And that's the hard part, because there are so many great athletes, and in men's professional sports, or sports in general, is that, you have the MLB, you have the NFL, you have, different sports for them to go into. Once the superstars have, their great college careers, they go on to men's professional sports. We need to do a better job in the United States of supporting women's team sports. And so for me, I think the Athletes Unlimited is fun. I mean, today's younger generation, it's more about building stars versus team. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's where we have to be right now, because we don't have communities that can support softball teams. I've always said, if we started a good professional league, it would need to be regional. Our country is so big that you end up spending all the money on travel instead of on the athletes. So we almost would need a division where there's 5 or 6 teams in the Chicago area, 5 or 6 teams in the Atlanta area. And basically you're playing teams in your division, and then maybe you hop out of your division and you go play in other areas. But the key is that you can't be 5 teams spread out across the US, and then the airlines are making all the money and there's nothing left over for the athletes. And so it's tough. I think that it's a conundrum right now within our sport. The other thing too is the strength of our grassroots level. The kids are playing so much, they don't have time to go watch professional women's sport, So that's the other thing that makes it difficult. We got to have people in the stands, or we have to have a good TV contract so that people, can see the sport. So there's definitely challenges, but I hope that we continue to give opportunities. I know that USSSA Pride is a team is still out there. So there's 2 different leagues right now that the athletes are playing in, either AU or I think it's the WPL, on some professional or professional fast pitch leagues. So I don't know. It'll be interesting for sure to see. And then you have Team USA. So you still have athletes playing for Team USA. So it's there's a lot of different things. So it's hard to get those eyeballs all on, it's not just one area, like playing Major League Baseball. We've got all these different things going on at the elite level.
I think, in my opinion, I think right now, whatever we can do to get the name out there, or the sport out there as much as possible, and then just keep drawing attention to the game, keep drawing attention. Somebody way smarter than me is going to be able to sit down and go, you know what? We need this. We need to figure it out. Let's do it the right way once and for all. Let's get something legit. And I've talked to some other people about this as well. I honestly think that Major League Baseball needs to get involved somehow, some way with a professional softball league and have it ran in some way. I don't know in what capacity, but use their model that's not the greatest, but in some way, I think it could help softball.
Yeah, I had always, like, even through the 90s, coming off of all the excitement from the 96 Olympic team, I had really wished that our league, professional league that they were trying to start back then, the Women's Professional Softball League, the WPSL, is that they would have buffered it with minor league baseball. Yeah. The biggest issue is the stadiums. And so in Japan, baseball's played on a skin infield. So the softball field fits perfectly because we're a skin infield. So we fit perfectly in these minor league baseball stadiums. Here in the US, because baseball, has the grass infield, we obviously don't fit, or then there's turf. And so it just doesn't look good. But that's unfortunately, that is one of the aspects. I do wish that we did. We're able to cross promote with AAA teams and certain markets and be able to grow the sport. But yeah, Major League Baseball, if they would have stepped up years ago, look at the way the NBA stepped up for the WNBA. We at some point you've got to have some support and some help. So
I think so too. Well, we've come to the end of this season, college softball. In one word, put a bow on this season for you. What's your take?
Well, just dominance, Oklahoma, Jocelyn Allo. I mean, just, I think some people too look at that program and they just see, they got all the best athletes, but, they work very hard. I think, don't ever underestimate just, success continually being just, easy, because they make it look easy. So, I think though, moving forward, I think we have to be careful with the portal and the different things. I mean, the whole extra COVID years are really starting to bounce people around with the portal. And I mean, I think it's good for the athletes, but at the same point, there's issues when it's only the rich get richer. And so now all of a sudden we're kind of building these super programs where they keep getting all the best athletes, because of course someone wants to go to that program to try to win a national championship. We need to keep the sport relevant and interesting. That's my only concern when we start having these, super programs where all the top athletes just transfer to all the top schools. And maybe once we're through the COVID year here in a year or two, maybe it'll settle down a little bit more. But those are the things that I worry about our sport, because I'm constantly trying to promote the sport. I constantly want people to watch our sport. So I want it to be compelling. And if all of a sudden it's not compelling because people are like, Oklahoma's going to win it again, or, we don't want that. It's just like if every year we knew the Yankees were going to win, people wouldn't watch the game. So there's got to be a certain amount of intrigue within the sport to keep people invested and keep people wanting to come back. So, but I think we're in a good job. I think in a good area. The sport continues to grow. The ratings are great on television. And so as long as we're, trending up, then that's a good thing. I don't have a dog in the fight. Obviously I like it when Oklahoma State does good. Where I went to school, but I love all things, Oklahoma softball, but I'm very proud of the state with USA softball, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. I mean, they've done such a great job. But I love the way the SEC has built these amazing programs. Now the ACC with their network, right? So we've got so many opportunities for young girls and women and men that want to, be within the sport. So I think that we just have to, continue to keep the intrigue in our sport. And if we do that, we'll continue to grow.
I do too. Talking to a lot of different folks, that transfer portal, I don't think anyone likes it unless they're using it, I guess, is the general consensus on that. And with the COVID year and the super seniors and stuff, I know there is genuine cases to where it was legit. And then I see now where those super teams and power teams and stuff are being put together. I think on some level it's helping grow a program, and then other levels it's helping just the rich get richer, like you were saying. This year, I don't know if we could say we had a Cinderella, kind of like we've had it in the past, where you're really seeing, okay, here comes the underdog. I mean, with Texas this year, I think they were coming. I watched them all year long, and I think they were coming. You can't really do anything with the long ball if they just keep hitting the long ball like Oklahoma did this year. I mean, they smashed all year long. And what do we do I don't know necessarily say fix that, but I mean, have you heard moving back fences? Have you heard deadening the ball? What are we doing with back compression? Are we moving pitches back? Like what I think
I've been a huge proponent of saying the quickest, fastest way and the least expensive way to fix our sport, where it's maybe just too lively and there's too many home runs, is the ball. Absolutely. Because there are some stadiums that you can't go back an extra 5 feet or 10 feet, or you can't go up. So they're landlocked, they're building locked, and just think the amount of money that it would take at every different institution. I think the issue is first the ball, and then secondly the bats, and it's very easy to tame those a little bit. And I feel like, again, that we have to, because when you're a pitcher and you get someone to mishit a ball, but it still leaves the yard, then you're not rewarded. You're being penalized for making that great pitch. And so for me, that's where I think that we have to make some adjustments to the sport. Also for the safety of the athletes, I'd like to see an orange bag at first. I've also been a proponent years ago. I went to the NFCA and talked about the size of the river. It's the same in baseball as it is in softball, and our softball is 33% larger than a baseball, so our river should be a little bit larger, so then we don't have hitters leaning into pitches, and so pitchers can actually own and get back to working on the inside corner. So there's all these little things I think we could do to the game to really adjust it, to tweak it. I do think, as you mentioned earlier, though, this year's Cinderella story was, to me, just the depth and the parity throughout the country. The number of mid-majors that had no problem knocking off Power 5 teams, or even within a Power 5 team, anybody in any conference could beat anyone on any given day. And then the lessons that you learned from a team like Texas, who was awful in Clearwater, 0-5, and just they looked like they wanted to kill each other. They just were battling internally. But it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And they figured it out. They got on a roll. They taught you that you can't underestimate momentum, playing well at the right time, and how hard it is to beat teams consecutively over and over within the same year. And that's what you saw with Oklahoma State. They were 4-0 against them, and then bam, in the semis, Texas knocks them off and goes to the Champ Series. So there's so many lessons within our great sport, spring sport this year, that it's if you go back and really start to look at them, it's kind of a lot of good stuff to log. That's for sure.
I think this year with the College World Series, I think it had a lot for everybody. You had some dominant pitching performances. You had tons of speed on the base pass. I've never seen speed ever like this. And then you had the long ball. You had great stories. You had comebacks. You had injuries where players were coming back. I think it just shows how great this sport is. And I can't wait to get into the off season, figure out where everybody's going.
Yeah.
and then we get right back to it. And are we going back to Clearwater this year to this coming season to get started back up and it growing? Is there more teams?
Yeah, 16 teams still. So same amount of teams, but it's going to be another really good one. Great way to start the sport in February. It's softball on television in February, which is huge because we're, that's normally just all programming for basketball windows. So the fact that ESPN is stepping forward and putting women's softball on in basketball windows is key. It really shows how much they love the sport. And then ESPN events, this is the first standalone women's event, and they love it. It's been great, and I think the fans, when they come, they love it too. Really good access to being close to the athletes.
Well, I can't thank you enough for joining me. I can't thank you enough for what you have done for the sport, what you are doing for the sport, and what you will continue to do for the sport. I think you're a wonderful person. And I appreciate you for stopping by and dropping just knowledge. I think you're wonderful. What do you have going on personally now or in the future? What do you got going on? What can we promote for you? What can we do for you?
Well, I was in commercial real estate, and I had a couple of small hotels. I sold those because I was like, man, that is just too busy. This just little stuff where I live here in Treasure Island, Florida, but I still do own a wedding venue. It's called the West Events, and it's in Madeira Beach, Florida. And so if anyone's looking for a destination wedding down in Florida, look us up, the West Events. So it's called the westeventspace.com. And so it's it's a fun project. I like to, it's kind of what I do when I'm not on the softball field. I like taking old buildings and bringing them back to life, bringing them purpose. And so I do that. And then I sit on some charity boards called the Diamond Foundation, which is supports baseball and softball players of need. And I also sit on Clearwater for Youth, which is a really good institution here in Clearwater, Florida, that basically ensures that no child's left behind. If they want to play sports, we help fund them. And we give out close to $200,000 a year to seniors in the area for scholarships. And so it does just a lot of great stuff within the community. So I'm always got my hands in something.
That's awesome. Well, take a break, kind of decompress from the season. I know you've been busy. We've, talked back and forth a couple of times during the season trying to get together. And I know you're busy. I look forward to getting back up with you again sometime and do this again and kind of, make this sort of a routine every once in a while to kind of figure out what's going on when something pops up in the world that, we feel like we could talk about and kind of share for the people. That would be awesome. So thank you again, Michele, for coming on. I appreciate you so much.
My pleasure, Tyler. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, so that's a wrap for this episode. Huge shout out to Michele Smith for stopping by. It's not every day you get to talk to a two-time Olympic gold medalist. A lot of information was passed there. I took a lot of information from her personal story, her personal growth. You can tell, man, she's just a great, genuine person inside and out. When she talks about the international game, the game growing, I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done there. Our collegiate game, there's a lot of different things going on with the transfer portal. You're building powerhouse teams. There's the haves, there's the have-nots. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on. Michele breaks down a lot of that for us. It's really great to hear someone like her get her opinion on things, and from such an ambassador to the game. So hope you guys got something out of that. I know I did. If you wouldn't mind, please hitting that like button and sharing this stuff. Share it with a friend, and when you do, you tell them you love them.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.